Everyone knows that children are better language learners. It's common sense. It's also wrong? You've heard this story before. A family moves abroad. The 6-year-old is fluent in half a year, while the parents take years of classes and still sound like tourists. When it comes to language learning, we always say kids are like sponges. They absorb the language naturally, while their parents struggle with grammar and never seem to get the accent right. It's called the critical period hypothesis, that says there's a biological window for language learning that supposedly closes around puberty. After that, you're basically fighting against your own brain. But is this really true? What if the reason that kids seem better at language learning has nothing to do with their magical young brains? And actually, it takes children years to master even basic grammar in their first language. They're still making mistakes at age 5. So, should we even be amazed? If adults really are hopeless at languages, then why are millions of people successfully learning new languages in their 30s, 40s and beyond? I mean, why are you watching this video? You are probably above 18. Maybe it's time we stop making excuses about our age and start understanding the real advantages we have as adult learners. Because there are quite a few. Let's start by understanding what we are actually comparing here. When we say children are better language learners, we are usually comparing a child learning their first language to an adult learning their second language. And to be honest, that's not really fair from the get-go, because it's like comparing someone who's trying to learn how to walk with someone who's trying to learn how to skateboard. Very different things, but let's stick with it for a second. Think about what a typical child's language learning situation looks like. They have 2 full-time personal language coaches, their parents, who spend literally years teaching them. Every single one of their daily needs is taken care of, so they can focus exclusively on communication and play. They get constant feedback, patience, and complete immersion with no other way to communicate. And now compare this to the situation of the average adult language learner. You're juggling work, bills, relationships, and responsibilities. Most adults that say they are learning a language mean they go to a class once per week and might get 20 minutes a day to study, if they're lucky. So think of it this way. If you as an adult have all your needs taken care of for the next 5 years, so you can focus entirely on acquiring this new language you want to learn, would you be able to learn it within 5 years? Yes, I'm 100% sure you would. Probably even 2 or 3 languages. So with all those advantages children have, they still take years to get fluent. But yeah, like I said, we are not really comparing the same task here. A child is building language from absolute zero. They have to figure out that sounds have meaning, that words exist, that grammar patterns also exist. An adult already understands all of these concepts and just needs to map them onto a new system. So the real question is, are children better than adults at learning a second language? And again, the answer is mostly no, they're not. When researchers have studied this directly, comparing children and adults both learning their L2, adults often outperform children in vocabulary acquisition, grammar learning, and overall speed of acquisition. The only area where children consistently have an advantage is pronunciation. Why have we as adults been fooled into thinking we are bad at learning languages? There are several reasons why this myth persists, but most of them are more psychological than anything else. First, we have completely different expectations. When a 6-year-old says, "I want cookie" in the second language, we are impressed by their communication. When an adult says the same thing, we think their language skills are bad. Children get praised for basic communication, while adults are expected to express themselves in a more complex way like they would in their native language. Think about it, a child's conversational needs are much simpler. They need to ask for food, toys, and attention. They talk about concrete things they can see and touch. An adult learner, on the other hand, wants to discuss their job, their opinions on politics, their relationship problems, their plans for the future. We're trying to express graduate-level thoughts with kindergarten-level vocabulary, and then we get frustrated when it doesn't work. Second, children have no shame when speaking. They'll babble nonsense, make wild gestures, repeat the same word 50 times, and not care how ridiculous they sound. Adults are terrified of looking stupid, so we hold back, speak less, and miss out on countless practice opportunities. We'd rather stay silent than risk making a mistake. Third, confirmation bias. Because of this myth we are discussing, we expect children to be better at languages, so we notice when they are good at languages. We notice every success and ignore every struggle. We expect adults to be worse, so we notice the mistake more clearly. Again, when a child mispronounces a word, it's cute. When an adult does it, it's evidence they are bad at languages. But what about the critical period hypothesis? This is the idea that there's a biological window for language learning that supposedly closes around puberty, after which your brain just can't handle new languages properly. Here's what's interesting. Recent research suggests this might not be biological at all. A major study found that the supposed critical period ends at around age 17 to 18, which coincidentally is exactly when most people transition to work or higher education. As the researchers put it, the critical period might be an epiphenomenon of culture. The age coincides with social changes that diminish one's ability, opportunity, or willingness to learn a new language. In other words, it might not be your brain that stops working at age 18. It's just that life gets in the way. You go from having a lot of time and energy to juggling responsibilities, stress, and competing priorities. So maybe the critical period is mostly a myth and the comparisons are unfair. In that case, what advantages do adults actually have? Like I said, quite a few. The biggest advantage is clearly that adults have something called metalinguistic awareness. You understand that languages have rules, patterns, and structures. When you learn that Spanish verbs change endings based on who's doing the action, you can immediately apply that concept to hundreds of verbs. This connects directly to adults' approach learning in general. You already know how to learn efficiently. You can use different tools and strategies like a spaced repetition system to become more efficient and effective. Children, on the other hand, are basically learning randomly. They absorb everything around them without any systematic approach until their brain extracts the pattern. But what if you could get the best of both worlds? What if you could combine the natural, input-rich way children learn with the strategic, efficient methods adults excel at? That's exactly why I built Langia. It gives you the massive input exposure that children get naturally. You can translate and simplify books, web articles, and other content to your exact level, so you're constantly reading and listening to interesting material. But it also follows a strategic approach with an integrated context-based spaced repetition system. When you create flashcards for new words, they don't just show up as isolated vocabulary. They appear in new contexts, like your imported content or the daily personalized stories. So you learn these words faster and more naturally. It's like having a child's immersion environment combined with an adult's learning toolkit. Another adult advantage is the vocabulary base they have in their native language. Adults can recognize cognates and word families to a larger degree. When you learn escribir means to write, you can quickly connect it to script, scribe, and inscription. Children don't have this massive vocabulary base to build from. But perhaps most importantly, adults can focus because they developed selective attention. The degree is of course dependent on the individual, but the average adult surely has more focus than a child. When you decide to learn a language, you can dedicate concentrated attention to specific goals. Children are learning languages as just one of dozens of skills they are developing simultaneously. Walking, social skills, basic math, tying shoes. Their attention is scattered across everything life throws at them. But wait, you might say, don't children have more neuroplasticity? Isn't their brain more flexible? Yes, that's true. Children have peak neuroplasticity, but that's something that never goes away entirely. If adults couldn't form new neural pathways, you wouldn't be able to learn anything new as you age. You couldn't master new skills at work, learn to use new technology, or even remember where you put your keys. So the degree of neuroplasticity decreases, but it's well enough to learn a language, especially because your brain is so wired for learning languages. In fact, adults can leverage their existing neural networks in ways children can't. When you learn that biblioteca means library, you're connecting it to everything you already know about libraries, books, quiet spaces, and learning. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Stop making excuses about your age. You're not too old, your brain isn't broken, and you haven't missed some magical window. You might not develop such a natural pronunciation of a child learner, but you have other advantages like analytical skills that children don't have. The only question is, are you ready to use these advantages? If you want to see how to put it into practice, check out my video on the Fluent Forever method next. Gabriel Weiner's approach is specifically designed around how adult brains work, using systematic pronunciation training, spaced repetition, and pattern recognition to accelerate language acquisition. So yeah, stop wishing you were 6 years old again and put your advantages into practice. Thank you for watching, and I see you next time.